Hello everybody, today I will be reviewing DM Brandon's tier list. This tier list is 100% the property of DM Brandon and Juice Gaming. I did not make this tier list, this is not my tier list. However, I'm going to be going over this tier list and adjusting it a little bit based on what I've seen, how the game is going right now. Plus, this tier list is a couple weeks old, so stuff has changed since this tier list first came out. This is the puch update tier list, as you see puch here, newest god. We're going to start by going over what the different tiers mean, and then we'll jump into moving some gods around. The SS tier. This tier is comprised of the god-tiered characters who have the innate ability to be placed onto any team with any comp and carry alone. Very, 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 very few gods have ever been SS at one time or another. And the SS tier is basically the gods that are so broken, it doesn't matter who else is on your team. If you have that god, then you just automatically win because the god's just going to carry and kill everybody. The S plus tier, these are your quintessential top tiers, which will generally dictate the meta stylings and team composition. And these are your first pick, first ban material type gods. The S tier gods are slightly above the point of balance. This pool of gods should comprise team compositions for most competitive games, and the ebb and flow of the meta and flavors of the month might shift this tier a little bit, slightly in favor of certain players' abilities and strengths. A tier gods, so A+, A, and A-, these are your focal point of balance gods. They should not see any changes given their current abilities in competitive high-level play, and new players should really flock to this pool of gods because their time invested will not be wasted, because these gods are not going to be nerfed, they're not going to be buffed, they're not going to be changed in any way because they are perfectly balanced. B tier gods, so B+, B, and B-, they're still somewhat strong but not always competitively viable like A, S tier gods are. And they're a little bit harder to fit into a team comp. You really need to kind of build around having that god on your team. And players with high skill can still sway the matchup in your favor when using a B tier god. But because they're in the B tier, there are better picks than that god. C tier, weak overall. You have to completely build a team around having that god on your team, and you're only going to see this gods in this tier in competitive scene if the person playing it is considered a master of that god, and like I said, if they completely build the team around that god. And your D tier gods, these are the worst of the worst, very, very low pick rate, and are competitively non-viable even in the hands of masters. So these are gods that you are never going to see in the competitive scene until the meta shifts or they are buffed a whole lot. Alright, so let's start going through this tier list. The SS tier is empty, which is right. There's no god in the game that is so completely broken that they can win on their own. S+, your top pick, top ban gods. Athena is the strongest support in the game right now. Her taunt is arguably the best ability in the game right now. So Athena, definitely S+. Bellona is very strong. Her ultimate Ego's rallies on such a short cooldown, plus the extra protections it provides, plus the fact that it stuns, plus the fact that it's a jump so you can use it as an escape if you have to. And all of that's just in her ultimate. She's got, the block stacks that she can build up on her shield bash, which with the continued increase in the amount of hunters you will see on a team, being able to build up block stacks is very, very good. Her bludgeon, if you hit 2 or 3 enemies with it, is going to do a lot of damage on the downswing if you don't get canceled out of it. And of course she has the increased attack range and the built-in lifesteal on her Scourge. So Bellona, very, very strong right now. Top pick, top ban. Serket has been top pick, top ban for a long time. I even think Serket was in the SS tier at some points in Season 1. She's just so strong. You got so much damage over time. She does have a relatively high skill cap, though, which is kind of hurting her viability in competitive play a little bit. But overall, Serket still S+ tier. And Sylvanas, of course, has been in the top 2 support conversation pretty much since he was released. He's got the heal. His initiate with his blink ultimate's good. If you can hit his pull, plus he's got the root on his 1, plus if you don't root with it, then you get the MP5 aura, which is huge. So definitely S+ tier for Sylvanas. On her S tier, on her starting to fall out of favor a little bit. Mostly due to the Heartseeker meta. He's not necessarily a god that thrives with Heartseeker. But still overall, S tier for on her, yep. Bakasura, S tier, absolutely. They nerfed him a tiny bit on his ultimate to try to reduce his level 5 power spike a bit. But still overall, Bakasura, one of the stronger solo lane gods, despite the fact that assassins in the solo lane are starting to fall out of the meta. Geb probably the number 3 support in the game. He's got a huge AoE stun on his ultimate, and Geb Shield is right up there with Athena Taunt for best ability in the game. Hercules, still the raid boss, still has a lot of damage, but is very hard to kill because he's got high defense, plus his self-heal. You can see him in the solo lane, or the support role, if you play in Europe. Hoonbot's still one of the premier junglers in the game. His ultimate Fear No Evil is just so strong. It's probably the best ability in the game when it comes to Fire Giant and Gold Fury fights. Isis, one of the premier mid laners right now. She's got the heal on her ultimate, which also use it to deal damage on enemy gods, plus it can help secure Gold Fury Fire Giant, so Isis very strong. It's got the stun and good wave clear. Janus, we're going to go ahead and slide Janus down here to S+. Janus is strong, he's got a lot of damage, he's got a lot of utility with it through space and time, but just overall, he's not seeing a ton of competitive play right now. We'll have to see how that changes with the continued increase in hunters in the mid lane. Medusa S tier, yeah, Medusa's still pretty strong. Her wave clear with her 2 is fantastic. The damage from her 1 is good, and her ultimate can just destroy people. Even if you're not looking at her, the amount of damage it still does, plus the slow. Can play her really any place you would put a hunter, so you can play her in the mid lane or the solo lane or in the usual duo lane spot. Poseidon, still one of the best mid laners in the game. His 100-0 potential is stronger than probably any other god in the game right now with his Whirlpool Kraken combo. Rom, I think we're going to continue to see Rom slip a little bit out of favor because of the Heartseeker meta for hunters, because Rom is not necessarily a god that you need to stack a lot of power on, but still, if you go the traditional Devourer's Gauntlet build with him and go triple crit, late game Rama is still going to hit hard. Thor, still one of the top junglers in the game. He's just got so much utility with all the stuns he can do. The double tap on his hammer just does so much damage, plus he's got the teleport from it. And Xbalanque, still one of the hardest hitting hunters in the game, late game. His global blinding ultimate is superb, and he just hits so hard late game. Bastet S- is fair. Bastet's still a very good jungler. I think she's right where she needs to be in S-. Kronos, I'm going to slide down to A tier. Well, maybe. I'll slide him down to A tier. He quits hiding behind Freya. We're going to move him down to A tier simply because he doesn't have a good place in this meta right now. He's a good, strong god, and he's got probably the best tower kill potential in the game. But you're not going to play him in the duo lane. Mages don't really fit in the solo lane right now because of how much invading there is. And he doesn't have good mid-camp control, so he's not very good in the mid lane. And his only escape is on his ultimate that's on a pretty high cooldown. Nemesis S tier, I think, is pretty fair. Nemesis, I believe, is starting to come back a little bit more now. Back into the meta. Just this protection shred on her ultimate, plus all the slows and the double dash that you can use to catch up to enemies or get away is very good. Scylla in the S- tier, yep. Scylla is still very strong. Has a decent escape with her 3 and has very good 100 to 0 potential like Poseidon does. Sobek S- tier, absolutely. He can be a decent support, and he's also a pretty good solo lane god right now, as Guardians are really in meta in the solo lane right now. Hunters are really kind of coming in. Warriors are still there. Assassins still there a little bit, mostly just Bakasura. But Guardians still have a good place in the solo lane. And Sobek's one of the best solo lane Guardians in the game of Smite right now. Sun Wukong, he's going down to A tier because I think Sun Wukong is perfectly balanced. He's just, the perfectly balanced god. And really, in competitive play, the only place you're going to see him is the support role. I mean, occasionally you might see Sun Wukong solo or even Sun Wukong jungle, but mostly you're going to see him in the support role. And I just think right now he's at the perfect point of balance. Giannis we talked about already, so we're going to move down to the A tiers. So we'll start with A+, Bacchus. We're going to slide him up to S-. They gave him knock-up immunity on his 3, I believe. I believe it was knock-up immunity. They added that to his burp. And plus, what really helps Bacchus is you don't necessarily have to buy Blink on him because he has his belly flop. So that frees up an active slot. Because with Geb and Sylvanas, to really initiate good with them, you have to have Blink, so you can blink and then use your ultimate. But you don't need the blink with Bacchus nearly as much, so that frees up an active slot, so you can get a Heavenly Agility, or you can get a Weakening Curse, or a Shell, or a Girdle, along with your Hand of the Gods tier 3, because you're a support and you have to buy it. Fenrir is really starting to come back now. You'll see some Fenrir support, mostly from Aurora on Team Eager. Very aggressive support if you play him in the support role. And he's also doing pretty decent in the solo lane right now. He's super, super strong early. He falls off a bit in the late game, but I think A+ is a pretty good spot for him because he's balanced, but he might just be a little bit better than perfectly balanced. So A+ tier. Guan Yu, I think, is right where he needs to be. He's still not super competitively viable, but Cyclone Spin has been able to play him in the solo lane to success. And you can play him in the support role pretty well. He's got the heal. Ra, I think A+ is a good spot for him. I wouldn't necessarily pick a Ra before I picked Giannis, Scylla, Poseidon, or Isis. But overall, Ra is still good. If you can hit the snipe, you're going to do a lot of damage with it. He's got the heal, and his wave clear is pretty good. Agni, we're going to slide him up to A+. Whoa, where'd he go? He's hiding. There we go. A+ for Agni. I think Agni is right in line with Ra in viability right now. What makes Agni better than some other mages is that you don't have to set up Agni to be able to hit his huge damaging abilities, because he has the ability to stun in so many different ways with his Noxious Fumes combined with any of his other abilities, that he can really set himself up. Plus he has an escape, which is really nice. Ao Kuang, I think Ao Kuang's pretty well balanced, A tier. Aphrodite, she's pretty balanced, A tier, but she just doesn't necessarily fit in the meta right now. You're not going to play Aphrodite support, despite the fact that her passive completely works off of her being connected to somebody. She just doesn't have the peel or the initiate to be a support, and mages in the solo lane are completely out of the meta for the most part right now. And you can put her in the mid lane, but her mid camp control is not the greatest. Plus, not having the blue buff would be tough. Arachne's pretty balanced. Arachne's pretty pub stompy. You can play her solo or jungle, mostly solo. Basically, if you can get fed early as Arachne, you can just carry the game. But if you don't get fed early, you're not really going to be able to do much late game. Cupid, I think, is perfect right where he is in the A tier. Cupid's pretty good. He's a decent counter to Xbalanque. I think the Heartseeker meta fits Cupid pretty well because he's a little more ability-based than, say, Rama is. But he's still not super hard-hitting late game. So I think A tier is the perfect spot for Cupid. Hades, A tier, yeah, Hades is pretty balanced. Really, you're only going to see him in the solo lane, and even that's kind of falling out of the meta now. Even with Guardians being popular in the solo lane, he doesn't always play like a Guardian in the solo lane. He plays more like a mage. Freya, A tier, I think that's pretty fair. She got a buff to her base numbers recently, but I just still don't think she's going to be super viable right now. She just doesn't really fit anywhere onto a team comp. Kali, I think, is still A tier, despite the fact that Chinsai's got the heavy nerf coming into Season 2, which Chinsai's is Kali's, core item. But, she still has the ability to be a hyper carry. But I wouldn't pick her before I would pick Bastet or Hoonbots or Thor or Serket or Bellona. So still A tier for Kali, I think, is fair. Kukulkan, A tier. Yep, Kukulkan is a very balanced god. He's got decent wave clear off his tornado. His ultimate's pretty hard hitting, but it can be hard to hit, so you're going to need some setup. Loki, A tier. Loki has really been falling out of the meta further and further down, but if you caught the Eager versus Denial esports game last weekend, Denial pretty much won game 2 off of split push from Loki. You're really going to see Loki in the solo lane. You're not really going to see him jungle in competitive play anymore. But his split push potential is better than probably any other god in the game. So I think with the right team, Loki can still be pretty viable. Mercury, we're going to slide him down to A-. Mercury's good. He's pretty balanced, but he's just not super viable right now because of the amount of CC immunity there is in the game. His throw isn't as effective, and the CC you get from his ultimate just isn't as effective anymore. Plus, you need to build a bit of a team comp around that to the point where you're going to set him up nice. He does fit well with some top picks like Poseidon because you can throw him right into a Kraken, but I still don't think Mercury's super competitively viable right now, so I think A- is really the spot for him. Nuwa, I think, is a perfectly balanced character, so A tier is perfect for her. She's not super competitively viable, but she can be played and can do well if you can play her right and if you have, the right pieces in place on your team to be able to support the Nuwa, because she doesn't have very much of an escape. She's got the invisibility and the movement speed buff from her fog, but that's about it. Thanatos is pretty balanced. Very strong early game. In the early game, you really just want Thanatos to kill everybody he can and get fed. But then in the late game, he doesn't necessarily fall off, but his role kind of switches. He's going to use his ultimate more to set up kills than he is going to secure them. And also, he's going to be a tank shredder late game because your Guardians are going to have super high health pools. So his execute's going to be very helpful in taking them down when you get the kill threshold up to a higher percentage at the higher ranks. They're still going to have a lot of health, so they're going to be hard to take down without that execute. Tyr, very balanced right now. He's got a lot of CC. Very good warrior in the solo lane. Uller, very strong. I wouldn't necessarily pick him into the duo lane before I would pick Shibalanke or a Rom, but he's going to be very strong in the solo lane as the Hunter meta in the solo lane continues to become more and more popular. Vamana is really in the same spot as Tyr. His ultimate is very strong, the extra healing regeneration, but a weakening curse can really help shut down Vamana. But still, overall, a very strong warrior for the solo lane. Falcon's balanced now. In Season 1, for the most part, he was, S+ tier because his meatball knocked up and stunned, and it was very, very overpowered. Which, they took the stun off the meatball now. Ymir, overall, a fairly strong support. I wouldn't pick him in the support role before I picked Bacchus, or Geb, or Athena, or Sylvanas. But that being said, Ymir is becoming more and more popular in the solo lane and in the jungle, especially in North America. Zhonghui is going to come down. Probably B+. I think it's a good spot for Zhonghui. He's got the heal in his kit, he's got the stun, and his ultimate is great in team fights, but just overall, he's not super strong right now, and he doesn't have an escape. So I think B+ is good for him. And we talked about Kronos and Sun Wukong already, so we're going to slide down here to A-. Ares. Ares is a very strong, aggressive support. The cripple from his chains is very strong, and the damage coming out of it. The problem is that while Ares' ultimate no escape is strong, there's just so much CC immunity in the game now that it's not as good as it used to be. With Purification Beads and Magi's Blessing, plus so many gods having CC immunity in their ultimates, like On Her and Nuwa and Tyr and several others that are CC immune when they go into their ultimate, that he's not quite as viable as he used to be. Chang'e's overall is a strong god. She's pretty balanced. She's got the heal, she's got the anti-healing, she's got the stun on her ultimate, but there just really isn't a good place for her in the meta right now. So I think A- is a good spot. Osiris, B+. I'm going to slide him down. He's gotten some buffs to his base stats recently, but still just overall, the nerf to chin size hurt him too. And just overall, he's not super strong and not really in the meta right now. So we talked about Mercury. Slide down to the B tiers, B+. Artemis. Think that's right where she needs to be. She doesn't have an escape. Her ultimate can help her escape if she needs it, and her ultimate's good in team fights. She's got decent poke from her 3. She's got the attack speed steroid, but just overall, she's not super strong, and she's pretty gankable because she doesn't have an escape. So you really need to have a support that has a lot of peel if you're going to play Artemis. Awilix is actually a really strong god, but there are 2 problems. 1, she has a super high skill cap, and 2, you either have to put her on a team that has a lot of knockups, so you want to put her on a team with, a Geb and a Poseidon or, a Bacchus, gods that have a lot of knockups, or use her as a counter pick to a team that has a lot of gods with jumps. So that's pretty much, because she's such either a counter pick or a pick that you have to build your team around, couple that with a high skill cap. So despite the fact that she's strong, she's still only B+. Hu Yi B+, I think is fair. He's decent. He can be competitively viable. he's just not super strong right now. His ultimate leaves a lot to be desired, because if you can't freeze somebody in it, they're going to escape it really easily. And it's really best used on the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant, and also to zone out. John Queen Osiris we talked about already, so we're going to slide down to B tier. Amuzin Cobb. Amuzin Cobb is a pretty hard-hitting hunter. His attack speed is through the roof. The problem is that, again, he has no way to escape, so he's easily gankable. Apollo, we're going to slide up to A-. Apollo's wave clear got nerfed pretty good coming into Season 2. But still late game, he's going to hit like a truck. He's got the global ultimate. Plus, as you see more and more hunters in the solo lane, Apollo's only going to become more and more popular as that hunter in the solo lane. Chalk overall is pretty decent. He's got decent wave clear and decent poke with his axe throw and his torrent. He's got the sustain from his heal, and he's got the AoE silence. The problem with Chalk is that he just has no late game potential at all, so he doesn't really fit in this meta, because he just can't really do anything late game, because his abilities aren't going to scale huge late into the game, and his auto attacks really aren't going to be swinging too hard late into the game. Habois, B tier, I think is fair. He's not super viable in competitive right now. He's best in the solo lane because he doesn't have an escape, and his mid camp control is not good, so you don't really want to put him in the mid lane. And he's got a lot of damage potential, but again, he can't escape, and he's very gankable and very squishy. Hell is good, but she just has no place in the Conquest meta. You're not going to see really any play out of Hell right now. You're not going to put her in the mid lane because she just doesn't really have good mid-camp control, coupled with the fact that she's very mana reliant and really relies on having that mana buff. But you can't put her in the solo lane with that mana buff, because she would just get invaded on, and basically she's going to lose the lane before she can come online, and she's just going to fall too far behind to ever be relevant in the game. Kumbhakarna. We're going to slide Kumbhakarna up to B+. Kumbhakarna is becoming stronger and stronger with every patch, it seems like. And he just has so much CC that he can bring to the table. I think he's only going to continue to slide up the tier list if they continue to buff him like they have been. Now, this is probably the biggest change since this tier list came out a couple weeks ago. Neith, S+. She's a top pick, top ban. She's so versatile. You can put her in the duo lane. She's not necessarily the best in the duo lane, but you can put her in the duo lane as a traditional hunter. You can put her in the mid lane. You can put her in the solo lane. Her global ultimate that stuns is great to help set up kills for her teammate. The wave clear from her spirit arrow is great. She's got built-in sustain, plus the buff to Heartseeker was huge for Neith because she's a very caster-based hunter. And so stacking all that power on her is just going to be very strong. And she's now top pick, top ban material in competitive play. So Neith up to S+. Najah B, that's pretty fair. Najah is not great. You can play her in the jungle, you can play her in the solo lane, and you can play in con Najah support. But overall, she's just not super viable right now, not super strong. Odin. I think Odin is a lot stronger than a lot of people give him credit for. He's very early game oriented, and I think he's viable both in the solo lane and the support role. And as more and more hunters start to creep into the meta, I think you'll see more of Odin against hunters that don't have a strong escape to get out of his Ring of Spears, because you put them in the Ring of Spears, and they have no escape, and they can't lifesteal because they have 100% healing reduction while inside the Ring of Spears. So I think that'll make him strong against the continued increase of the popularity of hunters. Zeus, B tier. Yeah, you really got to build around having Zeus on your team. He's got the attack speed, steroid, and defense buff from his shield, but or sorry, movement speed steroid, and the extra defense from his shield. But just overall not super viable. You really have to run a 4 protect 1 kind of strategy when you play Zeus. C tier for Anubis I think is fair. He's a lot like Zeus. He doesn't have an escape. He's got a high damage potential, but he just has to stand still to do a lot of his damage, and that's just not really where you want to be. You don't want to be standing still when gods like Poseidon are super popular, where you're standing still ulting and he can just Kraken you. Cabrakan, we're going to slide Cabrakan up to the B tier. Cabrakan is slowly becoming more and more viable. He got a slight buff on his tremors. He's now knock-up immune. I believe he's knock-up, either knock-up, knock-back, or possibly both now while channeling his tremors. So I think you're going to continue to see a little bit more and a little bit more out of Cabrakan. And then Nox, we're going to put her in the D tier because Nox is without a doubt the worst god in the game of Smite right now. If you're not playing casuals or like gold or lower rank, don't pick Nox because you're just going to get crapped on because she's just not good right now. She can have decent sustained damage with her 3, and she's got the silence, and her ult has the CC immunity, but just really Nox just isn't good right now. So unless you're playing casuals or low level rank, just don't pick Nox and don't play Nox. So that's my review of DM Brandon's tier list for the puch patch. Let me know in the comments of what you think. If I ranked someone too high or ranked someone too low. A new tier list should be coming out shortly because a new god is coming out shortly. That squirrel whose name I can't pronounce. And so we'll have to see where puch falls. Puch is pretty strong. I have a feeling he'll probably be A+ or higher on this tier list, barring any huge buffs upon his release. So yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed. I will review the next tier list when it comes out. Comment what you think of my review, and I will see you guys in the next video.